The Chrysalids, Chapter 3 and 4. Chapter 3 Summary. David and Sophie played together regularly, and then he considered telling Sophie about his secretive dream, due to how close they are, but decides not to tell since he found it meaningless. They talked and wondered about the old people. Afterwards, while David tried to band-aid himself at home, he did poorly and conveyed that he wishes for a third hand, instead of his mother's help, which shook them intensely. Then Joseph makes the decision to make David go to his room and pray for forgiveness. Later on, David has a dream of Joseph slitting Sophie's throat, in which David felt stressed and uneased. He wished that the Wenders saw his grievance and empathy for Sophie.
Chapter 4 Summary. Uncle Axel spots David talking all alone, and he then finds out that he was telepathically communicating to Rosalind instead. Uncle Axel makes both David and Rosalind promise to keep the ability a secret. It turns out, however, that David was able to communicate to other telepaths who he doesn't know the name of, but he didn't tell that to Uncle Axel, as he didn't want to worry him more. Therefore, these telepaths made a pact to not reveal their abilities at all. Later on, an army of fringe leaders attempt to launch an invasion on Wacknock. David was absolutely shook when he noticed that one of the fringe captives looked practically identical to his father, Joseph Storm. Eventually, Joseph gets into an intense argument with Angus Morton about whether or not the great horses are offenses, which Angus has newly acquired. Joseph and the inspector get mad at each other because Joseph kept insisting him that the great horses should be considered offenses, which kept agitating the inspector since they are an approved breed. He then told Joseph that he needs to protect the great horses from harm by fools and bigots, which offended Joseph, resulting to him being furious at the inspector. Lastly, David teaches Sophie what he learns in school, since her parents prevented her from going due to her extra toe. David and Sophie went on to talk about the Badlands, Labrador, the old people, and the only correct path for civilization to follow, so that the people of Labrador regain everything they lost in tribulation.
Quotation and explanation. There was only one true tale, and by following it, we should, with God's help, and in His own good time, regain all that we had lost. Said by David on page 40. The explanation to this quote means this quote is important because it shows that the reason society follows the one true tale is to regain what they lost during the tribulation and to not cause another one. This quote tells us that the people of Wacknock are not evil just because they think mutants are deviations. They're just scared of disobeying their religion, and otherwise they're gone. Because if they do that, they think another tribulation will occur and they won't receive what they lost during the tribulation. This quote helps us understand that the people of Wacknock are not evil. They are just trying to restore what they lost during the tribulation.
Chapter 3 Character Development. The characters that appeared in this chapter are David Storm, Sophie Wender, Joseph Storm, John Wender, and Emily Storm. Did we learn anything new about these characters? We learned that David and Sophie experience personal growth, as Sophie is okay with David knowing about her sixth toe, and David even considered telling her about the dream he had, which is very noteworthy, as David was told to never share that specific dream about the city. This shows that the two started bonding together despite Sophie not fitting the norm. I thought of telling her about my dream of the city, and the things flying over it. But after all, a dream isn't much evidence of anything, so I let it pass. Said by David, page 25. This shows that David thinks Sophie is trustworthy and a very good person, despite the fact that she's a mutant and is from a different norm. Chapter 4, Character Development. What characters appeared in this chapter? David Storm, Sophie Wender, Uncle Axel, Rosalind Morton, and Angus Morton, along with the inspector. Did we learn anything new about any characters? We learned that David is a telepath along with Rosalind when Uncle Axel stumbles upon David talking to himself. Uncle Axel making David keep his ability secret along with the other telepaths shows how much he cares about David and how much of a good protecting and guidant person he is. Davy, I want you to make me a promise. It's this. I want you to keep it secret. I want you to promise that you will never, never tell anyone else what you have just told me. Never. It's very important. Later on, you'll understand better how important it is. You mustn't do anything that would even let anyone guess about it. Will you promise me that? Said by Uncle Axel, page 30. This shows that he really wants to guide David through his journey, and he's really loving and caring towards him.
Important quotations, chapter 3. And when at last he fell asleep, I had a dream, had David noted, as he dreamt about Sophie being slaughtered for the most recent purification, which was unfortunately a devastating reality as it foreshadowed Sophie being killed chapters later. David had this horrific dream in page 28, chapter 3. This also denotes to how meticulous his dreams are and what they represent. Whether it was about the old people's city, in tribulation, or Sophie's extermination, they always represent a bigger image, which has been shown chapters ahead. Important quotations, chapter 4. When David and Uncle Axel were chatting about the ability of telepathy, Uncle Axel stated, "It also helps to make things a lot more dangerous for both of you. I want you to make another promise that you'll never do it out loud anymore." This conversation has been brought up in chapter 4, page 31. Uncle Axel explained that it is dangerous and that they better not expose their telepathy. However, Uncle Axel later learns that Alan knew about the telepaths, which is dangerous since Alan despises deviants, which is why threats such as Alan were killed.
Class discussion question. How does Uncle Axel outsider's perspective as a former sailor provide a unique insight into the limitations and dangers of the beliefs held by Wagnockians? And how does his wisdom further influence David's understanding of tolerance and acceptance towards those who are different and other places beyond Wagner that are said to be frightful?